Hello, I'm the Resolute Cartographer, and this is Hardspace Shipbreaker. Now, I typically cover Fallout 76, but there are a lot of other great games out there, and this is going to be the first video in a series on these other great games, again covering Hardspace Shipbreaker. This is a game in early access on Steam where you can find it for about $25. It was developed by Blackbird Interactive and published by Focus Home Interactive. It's a great game and kind of in the vein, at least for me, of Viscera cleanup detail in terms of doing a job in the distant future. But it's one of those things where you kind of chip away at things and get things done until everything's just perfectly done, just right. So let's take a look at this thing and you can see how it is. Now I'm going to basically use my current account here, and we will go into the career section here. You're working for a company called Lynx Salvage, and you're breaking down ships in orbit above Earth. Now, so these right here are my quota. This quota right here is for me to get to the next level of employee. Right now I'm rank 8, a laborer, and I currently owe the company $793 million, or credits, or whatever it is you want to call it. I have 15,216 Lynx tokens. To basically explain this kind of stuff, you start out $1 billion in debt as they've used that money to bring you into orbit to work this job. Now, when you first start out, all this equipment here is owned by the company. In fact, the company, in my case, still owns my modular laser cutter and my handheld grapple right here. Come up to level 9, my rank there, I can purchase this grapple so I don't have to pay for it every day. Along with that, I'm also paying for this utility habitation that I'm living in right now. But let's actually start a shift here, and to do that, I can click here, view the ship catalog. Now, let's see what we've got here. We've got salvage runners, station hoppers, stargazers, and another station hopper here. Station hoppers are not really my favorite to break down. Salvage runners have some minor glitches with them. Again, this game right now is in early access, so there are some minor issues that you can still run into. For now, let's go with this stargazer right here. And these are the highest level ships you can break down currently. You start off breaking down much smaller ships, little like 1 to 2 room little objects. It's the cockpit and then like the little cargo area in the back. But this again is one of the larger ships you can break down. Now the thing you're going to do when you start out, let's just start looking around here first. We're in this berth here. We've got these things here that we can tether to, and then we can reel ourselves towards them. Again, anything like that. And this is the tether that I'm currently using. That's my habitation. That's where I live. If I look around, I can see all these other ships and platforms. Now, this does use at least semi-realistic physics here, so if I start pulling myself towards this thing and I stop, I don't just stop. I have to stop myself because I'm moving in free fall here above Earth. There's a barge here. This is where we drop certain items. Then there's also the processor. That's the item in blue. And then there's the furnace. That's the object that's red. We throw certain things in the furnace, certain things in the processor, certain things on the barge. Let's start breaking down the exterior of the ship here. So, as you can see, we've got these big solar batteries back there, and then they've got these sensor arrays, and they even have communications arrays on the top of those. Then they've got these little titanium panels here that are some sort of shielding or something like that. So what I'm going to do is pull out the cutter. I'm going to flip this cutter vertically here. This is one of the 2 modes of the cutter. This is the split saw mode of the cutter, actually. And I'm just going to aim this down here and start cutting these. Now, to be careful with this, because I can damage other equipment with this thing, so let's make sure I don't do that. Okay. And then I can also cut these. Now, the other way to cut these things is with the other version of the cutter, which is this single beam here, which heats up the entire object until it's gone. But as you can see, that takes a lot longer. But by the same token, they're gone now. There's no stubs left over. But what we'll do now is we'll grab these with a tether, and I'll fire the other end down here at the barge. And there it goes. I'll do the same thing here. Alright, now let's see about getting this sensor array off of here. Oop.
Salvage secured.
There you go. You can see that we just got those things deposited, and we got paid for them. Oop, there we go. Now this cutter can be used to cut hard points, and it can be used to cut the interior substructure of the ship, but it can't be used to cut the exterior of the ship, at least not yet. I think there's an upgrade that allows you to cut the exterior part of the ship. And as you can see, I can use this to just throw the things down there as well. I don't have to technically use tethers, and with lighter objects, I'm typically going to try to throw them down there because tethers are a resource you have to purchase, and I'd prefer to not have to purchase as many of those as I don't have to, you know? Okay, so let's see. These have been separated from the ship now, and these are fairly light, so I could just grab each one of these and toss it in there. And in fact, you want to grab these things by the structure that these are bound to, because notice this, if I grab this and I start pulling it, eventually that panel breaks off. And while all of this ends up going in there, that would mean I have to keep breaking these things down. So the better option is to simply grab with a tether onto that structure beneath it and toss it. Like that. And I can even then do something like this. And again with this. Oh, this one's still fastened on with something, I think. Yeah, missed that one right there. And again, let's just toss this thing in there. Now you'll notice that things don't actually have to go straight in there, because as soon as they get within that caution area, they will start being pulled in. And that functions with you too. Let me show you. If I get a little too close to this thing, if I stop here, no issue. If I stop a little bit further in, notice I start getting pulled in. Now at this point, the best thing to do is grab on one of these, pull yourself with a tether. Okay. Alright, now let's check out the other side of the ship real quick, and we'll do exactly what we just did over there. Now each shift is 15 minutes long, so you have to always keep that in mind. But you can come back to the ship for multiple shifts. But each time you go through a shift, it considers it to be a day, and so you get charged your normal living expenses every 24 hours as well. Oop, just damaged that pretty bad. As I told you, you gotta watch what you're doing. In fact, I think we're just gonna toss that part into the furnace now. We'll see though. I've had it happen before where I've cut off about a third of that thing, and it still just goes directly down to the barge. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so this is, again, early access. This thing's clearly just destroyed, but this one item at least currently still has a bug with it that it doesn't seem to matter. Okay, so let's toss that down there. At least it's still in one piece, so there's that. Let me do the same thing with these. Okay, now these things, we're going to have to pull them off as well, but they're fastened from the inside. We'll see that in a minute. Okay, let's grab this. And as you can see, we just turned in enough communications arrays that we completed a work order requirement. The game just thought that possibly that thing was flying towards me, so it had my guy put up his arms to fend it off. Let's see. And do this last one. Oh, I thought that was the last one. Never mind. There we go. Okay. Alright. Now then, yeah, I can see it. Thought it again. But work order. As you can see, that I've got these things to do. Salvage the reactor, power generator, ECU, the thrusters, electrical parts, mechanical parts, the nanocarbon, that's the exterior hull parts, the salvage the metal, that's the interior hull part, fuel, coolant, and atmosphere regulators. Let's take a look at the interior of this thing. Let me hide those objectives again.
Pressure levels dropping.
So the first thing you have to do once you go into the ship is normalize the pressure with the exterior environment. Alright, here we are on the Stargazer here. They typically have the one long hallway here. That's the engine room back there. This is the part that allows you to turn off fuel to the thrusters, but you do not want to do that until you have the reactor ready to be removed, because otherwise the reactor will melt down. Oh. Alright, well there we go. There is an area with higher pressure. Let's see, where I just saw... There it went. The data recorder here. Data drive, I mean. You can grab that. Alright, let's see if there's anything else in this room we need to look at. Now, oxygen is a resource you will have to replenish. Now, you either have to buy it, or you can sometimes find it here on the ships. So let me grab that, and that refills my oxygen. I now have 96 seconds of oxygen left. That'll, I mean, you occasionally do have to replenish that stuff by going back to the master jack. Oh, there goes another pressure drop.
Level decreasing.
I do believe that there's a better way to do this, but sometimes the pressure stuff is kind of glitched. But again, early access, so I don't hold it against them. The game is still incredibly fun. Now we're going to go into the superstructure of the ship here, and now we start removing the exterior hull. We're separating the main body from the keel of the ship when we break down these. There's the reactor down there. Want to avoid that. And if you see any of those pipes with those purple lights, those are fuel lines. We definitely don't want to hit those things with this cutter. Now we can also separate the keel from the other parts of the keel. There we go. We can also separate the other exterior parts of the ship from the other parts of the ship. Again, you also don't want to hit the fuel tanks with this laser cutter. Over here, we got this sensor point. As I told you, we can cut this out from the inside. So we cut these cut points. Alright, now grab the tether. Push it out a little bit. Tether it. And down to the barge. And there it goes. And now we can go back in that hole, and now we have an easier way in and out of the hole here. We can do the same thing on the other side. And let's be careful with the laser. You do not want to hit the fuel tank. And keep in mind that the laser's coming from your right, going towards the target. So you always have to keep in mind that you don't want something in the path of that laser that is potentially flammable or explosive in the case of the fuel. There we go. Now again, tether it. And there we go. Okay, now then, let's start cutting the rest of this thing apart. Now, I've upgraded a lot of my equipment here, so I've got a longer range on this laser cutter than you have when you start out. The laser cutter will turn, the reticule will turn red when you're pointing at something that can be cut with it, but keep in mind that doesn't just mean the cut points. Like this panel right here. This panel right here is something you can technically cut with the cutting tool, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to waste it, especially with this one. With the other one, we can cut that thing into chunks and throw it into the furnace, because that's what we're looking to do with all these things. Notice that if I point this thing at something that's not a cut point, it just refracts off like that. Okay. There's the airlock. Let's take out the supports for this one. And take off that. You can accidentally end up cutting the bulkhead. Not the bulkhead. The what the heck is it called? Airlock. I just said it. You can accidentally end up cutting the airlock in half, so you got to be careful using that other cutter tool to cut those little things. Is this thing still fastened somewhere? I don't think it is. Oh, am I looking at the wrong side? No. Well, let's try. There we go. Using that force push thing to get it out of the way. Let's grab it to slow that thing down. Alright, then let me grab the little control module off of it, because that goes to the barge down there, while the rest of that thing goes into the processor. And this... Wait, oh! Gotta be careful pulling things toward yourself. Luckily I didn't actually move that one that fast towards me. But if I check in here, there we go. There's another one of these controls. And with the rest of this thing, there we go. So then this has also been separated by now. So here's what we're going to do. Fire off a tether into the processor and grab it. And there goes a full chunk of the side of the ship into the processor. And that's the name of the game here. We're breaking down this entire ship. Starting with the exterior parts, moving on to the hull, And then moving to the interior sections of the ship. Again, it really thought the thing was coming towards me. These pipes with the blue lines are coolant. You also want to avoid cutting those things accidentally, because in this game you can be killed by things flying into you. You can be killed by explosions, reactor meltdowns, being set on fire, electrical outputs, like being shocked, I mean, and you can also be killed by being frozen to death with coolant. So, all things to look out for. These are coolant tanks here on the front. Now you have to start being careful, because eventually at a certain point the ship kind of acts like it's been bound up for a while onto the keel, and as you start cutting these cut points, that force can be released and the chunks of the ship can start basically flying apart. We'll see if we end up seeing that here in a minute or two. Let's separate more from the keel, but I saw that fuel line behind there. I didn't want to cut directly into this thing with that behind it. I really enjoy the music in this game too. I hope I don't get some sort of... Oh, there we go. I hope I don't get some sort of copyright strike because of that, but again, I think that's a major selling point of the game, is the music. I find myself humming this at times. Sometimes the amount of force holding these things together can kind of violently fly apart.
Let's put a bow on this ship.
Can kind of cause the ship to violently fly apart, so something to always keep in mind. And again, always mind what's behind the cutter. Oop. Now let's say you're looking for places where you maybe have missed. We'll be fine. We only have 27 seconds left in the shift and 75 seconds of oxygen left. But let's say you're looking for more places to cut. Well, you turn on this mode, and all the points that are cut points show up in yellow. This also has different modes, like you can look at the different systems, like that. Like I can see all the fuel lines and the coolant lines and the reactor itself, computer systems and things like that. Alright, so look at that. We just made about 1.2 million on that shift, but again we still have 792 million left in debt. Now, and if we start the next shift, good morning, and here's your daily bill of $364,000. A good chunk of that coming from just interest payments, leasing the bay here, transporting ships to the bay, renting your cutter, renting your grapple, renting this hub, so the habitation, I mean. So again, this is pretty much showing you what you need to see about the game, but if you want to see me continue to break down this ship, I'm going to keep doing that here, so you can keep watching. Alright, now you can see the ship is really starting to come apart. Let's flip back to this view. Oh yeah, see the coolant tanks there. I like these different informational views. Okay, so there's still quite a few cut points on this side of the ship. So let's get in there and get those separated. Yeah, I'm willing to bet the controls for this seem like they probably have it on consoles. I honestly don't know. I'll check into that, and you'll probably see a decal here on this part of the video as to whether or not that exists. Let's be sure we're not about to cut into a tank when we cut this one. Okay. Alright, so that one is actually gone. It's just not showing up that it's gone just yet. Those ones are all on the exterior. They were holding on those exterior panels. Those ones on the rear are holding in the thruster nozzles. That one is not one we're going to cut, at least not at this point. Okay, we're good. We can now start seriously breaking this ship down. So let's fire off a tether, start grabbing more chunks of the ship. Now keep in mind that this side can start to get pretty full with these things, and if things start blocking the tethers, then the tethers will get cut. Also, tethers, they start off lasting only something like 30 seconds. By this point, with the upgrades I've made to my tethering gun here, it now lasts up to 2 minutes. Okay, so let's see if we can't Actually, yeah, I'm going to cancel those tethers because I just realized I should show you something here. And let me restart that one. And hopefully... Okay, let's slow this thing down. Okay, I think that did it. Well, nope, did not. Okay. Okay, no, that's slow enough at least. So let's get to this version of the cutter here. And we need to separate this aluminum section from the nanocarbon section. Because the aluminum part goes into the furnace, while the nanocarbon goes into the processor. Did that separate it? It didn't. It doesn't always. Sometimes takes a little bit of extra cutting. We'll check the other side now. There we go. Okay, that did it. Now we're leaving just a little bit of this aluminum behind that's going to go into the processor, which means we're going to lose a little bit of money, but not as much. See, that's all that's left of it right there. But again, we're getting that big chunk of it to go out in that way. Okay, so let's keep moving these chunks of the ship.
Object not accepted.
See, there goes that little bit of aluminum.
Object accepted for processing. Credits deposited.
Start pulling the keel into the processor as well. Nice thing is if you point at the hole, it'll start the tether on the outside even if you're pointing at the inside, so that helps out. Okay. But it will form on the surface you're pointing at, even if we're talking about the opposite side of the surface you're pointing at if you're pointing at the inside. So if you want it to go again from the side, you have to make sure that the tether can basically remain a constant straight line from between 2 points, which means you can't put it here on the top, otherwise it has to flip forward, and it might not be able to flip forward fast enough in order to be able to basically stay tethered long enough for the tether to remain. Let me show you what I mean here. Well, first of all, let me grab some of these keel chunks as well, just to get them out of the way. Okay, that'll do it for that. Okay, let's do it with these big chunks here. So if I take a tether and I fire it here on the top, and I send it into the processor. Oh, I guess that one didn't really prove my point there. About this one? Okay, well that's the other annoying thing about that, is sometimes they get caught up on themselves, effectively.
Tether supplies running low.
Okay, well, none of those work to show my point, but I'll see if I can point this out in a minute. But before this thing gets pulled in there, let me pull off all the coolant tanks, because these go down on the barge. Pull them towards myself just a little bit. Fire them down. Pull them towards myself just... Oh, jeez.
Salvage secured. Account credit applied.
There we go. Okay, there's another chunk of the keel. You'll go in with that.
Credits deposited.
Let me get this coolant tank here. And this one here. That might actually finish that part of the work order. Except for there's probably... Yeah, there's at least another coolant tank here. Okay. Now, this thing, I think, might still be slightly fashioned to the interior hull of the ship. We'll see about that soon enough. Let's see. Let me see if I can't pull this forward a little bit or not. Yeah, that's attached on the inside. Let's see if we can't fix that issue. This does happen occasionally. I think it's more of a bug than an actual intentional feature. Because effectively what can happen is the monitors in here will act as a way to keep the front of the ship fastened to the hull. To the interior hull, I mean. Like I said, as I start pulling these things off, these things were actually acting as structural supports to keep the hull attached to the interior hull of the ship. Okay. Oh, there's another coolant tank. But that's attached to the interior hull. So let's grab this. Start pulling. And I'm realizing I should have cut that other tether first. But at least this is pulling it out and away from the ship, so... Let me grab this now. toss that down there. Let me see if maybe I can prove my little why the tether needs to be pointed at the processor thing here.
Cutter, looks like
Nope.
you used your last tether. Head on over to the kiosk if you need more.
Well, we're 8 minutes away from the end, so let me go make sure I grab some more tethers. And let me end those tethers because they were definitely not going to work in terms of getting that thing into the processor. Okay. Here we go. Now I could buy oxygen, but I don't need it. I could buy fuel for my thrusters, but I don't need it. So I'm going to leave all that there. You keep on moving. And now you get in there. Typically with these large chunks, better to use 2 tethers, especially when you don't have tethers that last that long. See, that one's being blocked by that other chunk of ship. But yeah, with larger chunks of the ship, they move a lot slower. So if your tethers only last 30 seconds to a minute, you're going to need more tethers to get those things over there faster, because the number of tethers increases the amount of force that's pulling on the stuff. So let's see, I think that's not separate. But we got to be careful because there's a lot of fuel in here. But we also need to definitely separate, there we go, the hull from the keel here. Okay, you can see how much it's separating now already. Let me grab this thing out of here. Get that thing into the processor. Now, these rear chunks of the hull are difficult to get off and into the processor without pulling the rest of the ship along with them. So what you typically need to do, and I'm just going to do this real quick, I'm going to cut these thruster cones out first. Thruster caps, I should say.
Warning. Oxygen reserves are low.
We still have 76 seconds of oxygen, so we're fine for the moment. So what I'm going to do is grab this. And I'm going to move this thing. I could use a tether to do this, but these things are not that heavy, so just take care of that. Now, let's go get some oxygen from inside the ship. Now again, you're not going to find oxygen on every ship, but we do know this one has some. So we're going to use this here. Can't remember if there was some up here. I think there... No, it was further back.
Oxygen reserves are critical. Please contact your plan administrator to add asphyxiation coverage.
Yeah. Okay.
Oxygen level stabilizing.
We'll go... Actually... Nah, we'll leave that other one for now. Okay. Now then. Let's start pulling these things back so that we can then lift them over the ship rather than pulling the rest of the ship with them. And again, I'm going to remove this thruster cap as well. And this one I will tether in there. Just like that.
Cutter, there's 5 minutes remaining in this shift. Get in while the getting's good.
You're seeing another minor glitch here, in that sometimes part of the rear hull can get stuck to the interior hull. And in this case, this is happening because it's touching this pipe here, and these two parts are colliding, and as such, it's forming a bond between the two of them. That's definitely not something that's intentional. And this is also a pretty serious issue because I cannot cut this fuel pipe at this point in time. So this part of the hull is just going to have to stay on for the moment. But I can now start pulling the fuel tanks out. But yeah, just to basically clear things up if I wasn't clear there. The only way that I'm going to be able to get that chunk of the hull separate from the interior hull is if I cut the fuel pipe. So, again, got to be careful with these things, especially when you're maneuvering anything around a pipe, because any damage to the pipe can be catastrophic. In fact, I melted down a reactor not too long ago, and I'll show you a little clip of that here. Or at the very least, damaging the ship materials that you're trying to salvage. Like that. Oh no. Shoot. We're about to lose the reactor. Trying to save these thrusters, because these are actually more valuable to me than the reactor. I think we just lost a thruster.
Reactor dangerously unstable.
There goes the reactor.
Explosion detected. Proceed with caution.
And as you can see, that just really did the rest of the ship in the back end at least. So yeah, you have to be, ooh, geez, very careful with these fuel tanks. You really got to be careful around the fuel lines and the coolant lines as well. I one time had the ship nearly fully deconstructed and managed to destroy these very expensive thrusters by having it so that the coolant line ruptured, froze the thrusters, and then they shattered when they hit something. There we go, completed the fuel
Salvage secured.
work order.
Credits deposited.
Let's close that out. Okay. Now that this thing is far back enough, in fact, this is probably off to the side enough that I don't have to worry too much about it hitting anything. So let's just grab it with a couple of tethers. And I can also grab a couple of these parts as well, although this is a little bit risky because I could end up blocking the main part of the tether for that rear chunk. But let's start moving the rest of these things into the processor as well. The exterior hull almost exclusively goes into the processor, while the interior hull almost exclusively goes into the furnace. Okay, now also we can do things like grab, while we're waiting for that stuff to move along, we can do stuff like grab the ladder out of the airlock and fire that thing down to the barge down there.
Salvage secured. Account credit applied.
Alright, we still got 10 tethers left. I'd like to move as much, or use as many of those tethers as I can so I don't end up... Did that ladder actually get caught down there? No, no, there it is. There we go. Alright, let's see if we can't get the rest of these things into the processor by the end of this shift. Again, we're not going to be able to move that last chunk of the ship, but we can at least get the rest of the hull out of the way. Still got big chunks of keel here as well. Like this piece. And there's another small piece of the keel there.
Caution. Processing valuable objects. Credits awarded.
Okay. Alright, now we have almost just the interior of the ship left.
1 minute left, Cutter. Time to start wrapping things up. Weaver out.
Well, with this time we can start pulling stuff out of the cockpit. And also grab this and these lights. These lights are pretty small, and I don't think they're really even worth that much, but I think they do count towards your electrical salvage, which is one of the goals we got there, salvage electrical.
Oxygen reserves are low. Reminder.
76 seconds will be fine,
Missed salvage
because we only
quota.
have 24 seconds left in the shift. Let's grab some of these terminals.
Salvage secured. Credits deposited.
And grab this chair too.
Salvage secured. Account credits.
Oh, just damaged that terminal on the way down. But we made 3.8 million. Alright, let's get into the next part of the shift here. Okay.
Salvage deposit accepted. Credits transferred.
There are also storage containers in that part of the... What is going on with that? It is having trouble moving. Well, let's grab this terminal. Also minorly damaged that.
Salvage secured. Credits deposited.
Wonder what this thing was having trouble moving for. Anyway. Now, I'm not going to actually toss all these down just now,
Salvage deposit accepted.
because we've got
Credits
other
transferred.
bigger things to move. Well, I might just get these real quick, just because they're kind of a pain in the butt, but once they're out of the way,
Salvage secured. Account credit applied.
most of the rest of the ship is larger chunks of things to get rid of. But, okay. Let's see. The next thing we're going to try to get rid of is the reactor. And that is because it is the last really... It's the last thing that really makes this thing difficult to take apart. So let's get rid of the things that are around it and make it difficult to move. And then let's see about cutting these chunks of hull out of the way. You can melt away these entire struts here. But you got to make sure, again, that you don't have anything right behind it that might explode or something like that. Okay. Now to actually expose the reactor, and I might, well, we'll see what happens here. Let me grab these chunks of the reactor shielding and toss them into the processor. Again, avoiding that coolant pipe when pulling these things out. You got to move these things pretty gingerly around this reactor. There's the reactor itself. Okay, let me get these last couple of panels off the sides. Again, carefully not hitting the fuel line there, which I nearly did just now. Let's in fact pull these things off the side. Oh. And up. And then go around and toss them in. And yeah, we can grab that one too.
Credits deposited.
Heck, let's just take off the last couple of parts. And we can even grab this reactor plate and toss it down on the barge. Okay, so there goes that. Now, this thing isn't in meltdown yet, so we don't have to be terribly scared. We can also toss those just directly over there. I should have done that with the last couple. But anyway. Okay. Now then, we got to get to the next part of this. I'm not sure if I have a utility key or not, so let's go buy one real quick just to be sure that we have one. So let's get on over to the shop. Because I'm going to need to shut off the fuel from the reactor to the thrusters, or the fuel will start to explode.
Tethers restored.
I don't even know if I'd actually used any tethers yet. Oh, just the one, so that was a stupid purchase, but whatever. Okay, now the first thing we're going to need to do when taking out the reactor is get to the ECU, which is in here, and we're going to pull off this panel. Just toss it aside for now. And we will start to remove these coolant canisters. And you got to use your gun to do this. Technically, you can just reach in there and grab them, but if you do that, things will not work properly. Now, we just shot off coolant to the reactor, which in my head says that should mean the reactor just starts melting down, but that's not the case. We had to do that in order to remove coolant from the pipe so that when we start pulling the reactor out, the coolant doesn't just start exploding everywhere. Okay, now the next section of this, I'm going to need to actually remove this coolant pipe. Now this I'm actually going to be trying for the first time here because I'm not used to working with this setup. Because the... oh man, don't fail. Oh, thank goodness, okay. Because I typically try to work on the heavy cargo ships as much as possible because those are the easiest ones to start salvaging. Okay, now we can grab this entire chunk of pipe and throw it in the processor. That gets that chunk of pipe out of the way, so that now the reactor has basically a straight shot down to the barge, and that's what you're looking for.
Object accepted for processing.
Okay, so let's go shut down the fuel to the thrusters, but before we do that, we're going to do a little bit of preemptive action here. Oh man, I really wish this whole chunk was out of the way. Let's see. This preemptive action is going to involve us attaching these thrusters, which cannot yet move because they're still attached to the rest of the ship. We're going to put some tethers down there so that once these things are free, when we cut off the fuel to the thrusters... Oh, okay. That is not something I've seen before. And I'm worried I'm not going to be able to shut off fuel to the thrusters. Let's see what can happen. This is entirely new. I mean, I've never seen this before. Okay, let's shut off fuel. Use the utility key. Now the reactor has been released, so it is starting its meltdown process. But because we did everything right in the first place and shut off the coolant first, we don't have an issue with it. Now we can just use a tether to pull that thing down, and it goes directly down to the barge. There we go. Now then, this thing is a little bit of an issue, but it's not going to be a problem for us. In fact, I think all we really need to do now is cut this chunk off here. And we'll even cut this chunk off here too. I cut a little bit away from it because I didn't want to risk damaging it, but we can now throw this last bit of the coolant pipe in there. And we can also throw the fuel line in there. Except for the fuel line is still attached to the rest of the hole back there. So let's instead grab this and do that. Now then, let's cut the fuel pipe away from the rest of the hole like I'd wanted to do earlier, but we couldn't. And now we can grab this thing and it can go into the processor. And the same thing with this. Okay. And now the rest of this thing can go into the processor without having those chunks of pipe hanging onto it and stuff. Okay, and there is what's left of the ship now. It's really not that much. I mean, it's mostly just interior stuff at this point, furniture and things like that. So let's start getting rid of the electrical system here now that we can, though. You wait until all the red lights are gone, and then you can remove the fuses safely. If you don't wait for the red lights to go off, you will get shocked and you will damage the fuse. There are the rest of the fuses there. See, it goes 1, 2, 3, off, 1, 2, 3, off. Grab it when it goes off. Grab the fuse. Do the same thing on the next one. And I think the pattern moves faster the more fuses have been removed. Now then, we need to remove the electrical generator. And let's tether that thing down to the barge. There it goes. Now the last big ticket item in here. Wait a second, what's going on with the thrusters? Oh, one of them didn't actually make it all the way down. Those things are worth 450,000 a piece, though. I definitely want to make sure that thing gets in there. There we go. Then, let's see. Let's get that ECU out of there. Well, the ECU, actually, I know exactly where it is. And it is right in here. So let's burn out this. Let's burn out this. This. Your cutter can overheat. I don't know exactly what that does. And in fact, the tills can get damaged, but that doesn't seem to do anything just yet. I think it's part of the whole early access thing that nothing happens with that yet. But if I burn out these frames that are holding in this plate of aluminum, then I can remove the entire plate of aluminum. Let's see what's left here. Now again, just like that part of the hull was stuck on the rest of the interior of the hull, because that terminal making contact with both the inner hull and the outer hull, you can also have it to be the case where there's some part in here that's both attached to the floor and it's attached to the wall, and that can be the connective link that holds the floor to the wall. Let's also grab this in this atmospheric regulator, because that's another one of our work orders there. See, there's the ECU. And let's see. Yes, this table right here is holding the floor to the wall. That'd be my guess, at least. Let's see. There we go. Yep. See, now the floor starts drifting away. Now the ECU will be separated by us cutting this pipe. Again, do not do any of that kind of stuff until there's no longer coolant in the system. So this part now goes to the furnace. While we then pull the ECU down to the barge. And we can also pull this computer terminal down to the barge. What is that right there?
Accepted.
I'm not sure. Oh, it looks like this... Oh, this was damaged, so it has to go into the furnace. This is one of those things that we popped out of the side of the hole early on, the sensor right here. And because it was damaged, it can't go into the barge, it has to go into the furnace. Okay, I'm not sure if I damaged that or if it came damaged. These tables go into the furnace. Alright, and this little electrical pack also goes onto the barge.
Material deposited.
Alright, let's see. Now, you can pull basically everything off the walls here, including the posters, and fire those things down at the barge. But let's get the,
Your oxygen reserves are dropping below statistically profitable levels.
let's go grab another oxygen tank. And I'm probably not going to continue this into another shift, just because, I mean, I typically would if I were doing this just for myself, but because I'm making this for a video, I doubt you all really want to watch me pull furniture off the walls. So let me just get this out of the way, grab this oxygen tank.
Oxygen levels stabilizing.
Let's grab this the atmosphere regulator. And we will fire that thing down to the barge. And one more of those.
Salvage secured. Account credit applied.
Now at this point, I could just, again, mechanical, I could salvage another 8 of those,
Salvage deposit accepted. Credits transferred.
those, what's it called? Airlock handles. If you watch this real quick, if I grab this, I can toss this thing down there, and it goes from 4 to 5. I might do that real quick just to fulfill another work order, but let me show you another thing that you can do with this cutting tool, which is this. Cut the entire chunks of the ship apart. Like so. Now again, you've got to make sure you're cutting everything. And it won't naturally just cut those little struts that hold everything together. Okay, so let me just grab this. And now I can, well, we're going to have to pull this thing up and away and then throw it in the furnace because it's basically right in front of the ship. My guess is there's something holding this thing
All right,
on.
Cutter. Wrap it up. You got about a minute left.
Yep. These cabinets are likely holding this chunk of the ship to the rest of it. Yep. And this as well. Kind of nonsensically, but it seems that that was the case. Well, anyway, let me toss this thing down to the barge, and we'll see if there's something else that's maybe holding that thing in place. Okay, but effectively the end game of this thing is you grab the little chunks of the ship that you have left over, and you toss these things into the furnace. Oh, there we go. See, oh. Well, I can just grab this. It's not going to make it in time, probably. No. Alright, but yeah, 5.3 million off that shift. Alright, but that's the bulk of what we'll make off that ship, and I'm going to end the video here. But you can see how this whole game works, taking apart the ship in different systems, and it's something where, yeah, it's very repetitive, but I do this maybe once a day, and I enjoy it for that time, and it's like this kind of like check-off list where you're doing item after item, so you get these little serotonin bumps every time you do it. So anyway, or dopamine, I can't remember which one it is. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Hope you, if you liked this game, you should definitely check it out. Again, I got it on Steam for 25 bucks. It's a good game. I'm looking forward to seeing how it progresses. They just recently released an update where they added ghost ships that come back from the frontier with like hostile AI on board. So yeah, very cool stuff. Looking forward to seeing how it turns out. Anyway though, this has been the Ears of the Cartographer. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.